Just one day before Eid-e-Milad-un-Nabi, two mosques in Gaza are at the center of a new and deeply sensitive Israeli military operation. The Israeli military says it has destroyed Hamas weapons depots hidden inside two mosques. At almost the same time, one of Gaza's historic mosques has been heavily damaged in an Israeli strike. Palestinians are reporting fresh civilian deaths, including children, and the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate. And all of this is unfolding as Muslims around the world prepare to mark the birth anniversary of Prophet Muhammad. So what exactly happened? And why has the mosque issue suddenly become such a major flashpoint? Let's begin with the Israeli military's claim. The IDF says it carried out strikes in the Shati and Deir al-Bala areas of Gaza and destroyed two Hamas weapons storage facilities located inside mosques. According to the Israeli military, the sites contained dozens of Kalashnikov rifles, magazines, and other military equipment. The IDF says the weapons were being concealed inside the religious buildings and argues that Hamas was using civilian infrastructure for military purposes. Israel says that constitutes a violation of international law. The military also says warnings were issued to people in the areas before the strikes and that precision munitions and aerial surveillance were used to reduce the risk to civilians. Those are the Israeli military's claims. And it is important to make that distinction because independent reporting does not establish every detail of the Israeli account. What is independently clear, however, is that Israeli strikes have hit multiple locations across Gaza in recent days, with Palestinian medics reporting civilian deaths and injuries. And one particular strike has drawn enormous attention: the historic Abu Salim mosque in Deir al-Bala. The mosque was struck on Monday, August 24th. Footage from the area showed a huge plume of smoke rising over the site, followed by scenes of destruction and rubble around the mosque. Reuters linked imagery from the site shows extensive damage, with much of the structure destroyed. Palestinian reports described Abu Salim as one of the oldest and most historically significant mosques in Gaza. For people living in Deir al-Bala, therefore, this was not simply another damaged building. It was a piece of local history, a place of worship, a landmark that had survived generations. And now, after the strike, large parts of it are gone. But here is where the story becomes particularly sensitive. The Israeli military's claim about weapons stored inside mosques concerns two specific facilities in Gaza. The destruction of Abu Salim Mosque is a separate incident in the reporting we have available, and we should not automatically assume that the historic mosque was one of the two alleged weapons depots, simply because both events involved mosques in Gaza. That distinction matters, because in a war as polarized as this one unverified connection can very quickly become a headline presented as fact. And there is another major development: civilian casualties. Reuters reported that a 4-year-old boy and another Palestinian were killed in separate Israeli strikes, one on a house in the Bureij refugee camp and another on a road in Khan Yunis, according to medics. Earlier on Monday, another strike in Deir al-Bala killed one person and wounded another, according to medics. The Israeli military said that particular strike targeted a Hamas militant. And then there is the wider pattern. According to Palestinian reporting cited by Reuters, Israeli strikes have also hit areas including Gaza City, Deir al-Bala, and the beach refugee camp. A water desalination facility was among the locations reportedly struck. The Israeli military denied deliberately targeting the desalination facility. That is significant because Gaza has already been facing severe water shortages. A strike on a water facility therefore carries consequences that go far beyond the immediate physical damage to a building. It potentially affects an entire population already struggling to access basic necessities. And according to Al Jazeera, at least 7 Palestinians were killed in strikes on a water plant and other locations on Monday, including 2 children. Different reports have given different casualty figures and details as investigations continue. So the safest conclusion at this stage is that the violence has produced fresh civilian casualties, while the Israeli military says its operations are aimed at Hamas military infrastructure and militants. Now, why did this escalation happen at this particular moment? There is another unusual part of this story: kites. Israeli officials say kites had drifted from Gaza into southern Israel over the weekend. Several were reportedly found near an Israeli community close to the Gaza border. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz warned that forceful action would be taken to stop what Israeli officials described as a security threat. Israeli media subsequently reported that the military was preparing potential targets and issuing evacuation orders in areas associated with the Kite launches. The result? Another escalation in an already extremely fragile situation. And this is happening despite the broader ceasefire framework. The ceasefire that began in October 2025 has dramatically changed the intensity of the conflict compared with the peak of the war. But it has not stopped all violence. Reuters reported that more than 1,280 Palestinians had been killed since the ceasefire, according to Gaza health authorities, while Israel has reported 4 soldiers killed during the same period. Both sides continue to accuse the other of violating the terms and undermining efforts to move toward a lasting settlement. And now, add the mosque strikes to that already combustible picture, because the timing is impossible to ignore. Eid-e-Milad-un-Nabi is approaching. For Muslims who observe it, the occasion marks the birth of Prophet Muhammad. It falls on the 12th day of Rabi al-Awwal, the 3rd month of the Islamic lunar calendar. Because the Islamic calendar follows the lunar cycle, the corresponding date on the Gregorian calendar changes every year, and the exact observance can also vary depending on local moon sighting practices. But what does not change is the significance the day holds for millions of Muslims. For those who observe it, Milad-un-Nabi is a time associated with remembering the life and teachings of Prophet Muhammad, including values such as compassion, patience, humility, and helping others. And that is why images of a historic mosque reduced to rubble just before the occasion carry an emotional weight far beyond the immediate military story. But emotion cannot replace verification. The Israeli military says Hamas stored weapons inside 2 mosques. Palestinian sources say a historic mosque in Deir al-Balah has been destroyed in an Israeli strike. Reuters has independently reported civilian deaths, including children, from separate Israeli strikes. And Israel says its military operations are directed against Hamas militants and infrastructure, not civilians. These claims now sit side by side. The central question is whether the alleged weapons depots were indeed located inside the mosques struck, and if so, what military activity was taking place there. The IDF says the weapons were there, but the available reporting does not independently establish every element of that claim, and that distinction is particularly important under international humanitarian law, where the presence of military assets in or near civilian structures does not simply erase the protections afforded to civilians. At the same time, civilian infrastructure does not become automatically immune from attack if it is genuinely being used for military purposes. The legality of any individual strike depends on the circumstances, including the military objective, precautions taken, proportionality, and the expected harm to civilians. That is why each incident has to be examined separately. And Gaza right now presents an extraordinarily difficult environment for doing exactly that. People are being displaced, entire neighborhoods are being evacuated, buildings are being destroyed, basic infrastructure is under enormous pressure, and journalists and investigators face severe restrictions in accessing many strike sites. So what we are left with is a rapidly developing picture. 2 alleged Hamas weapons depots inside mosques destroyed by the IDF, a historic mosque in Deir al-Balah heavily damaged, a water desalination facility reportedly struck, with Israel denying it was deliberately targeted. Fresh Palestinian civilian casualties, including children. Israeli officials threatening stronger action after the Kite incidents. And all of this unfolding immediately before one of the most important dates in the Islamic calendar. For Gaza's civilians, the timing adds another layer to an already devastating reality. For Israel, the military says it is continuing operations to prevent Hamas from rebuilding its capabilities and attacking Israeli troops and civilians. For Palestinians, every new strike means another building destroyed, another family displaced, and potentially another civilian life lost. And for the outside world, the question remains the same. Can this fragile ceasefire framework survive when violence continues on the ground? Because the mosque strikes are not happening in isolation. They are another sign that, despite diplomatic efforts and a formal ceasefire framework, the conflict remains dangerously unstable. And just before Eid-e-Milad-un-Nabi, Gaza is once again seeing smoke rise over places that are supposed to represent shelter, community, and worship. The competing claims are clear. The facts that can be independently established are fewer. And in a conflict where every image can inflame public opinion, separating the two has never been more important.